wanted to talk today a little bit about a study we did on cattle movement, National Animal Biosecurity Center out of K-State, and funded by USDA. We looked at the movement of cattle from feedlots that are 200 head or more to slaughter, and looked at the movement patterns of those feedlots, what happens, and understanding the routing and movement of those cattle, and then what happens in the case of foreign animal disease, such as foot and mouth disease or something like that, that might come in and disrupt that. In that study, we looked at 12 states in the Midwestern area and Southern Plains, and it was interesting that as you look at cattle movements and how it can be impacted, one of the results is it really makes a big difference on how quick the first case is discovered and when do control measures kick in. If you don't find the first case for 14 to 21 days, you tend to get relatively large interstate and national spread, and you start disrupting quite a bit of the cattle flows. If you can find it within 1 to 3 days of its first occurrence, you can probably localize the spread of that disease and have minimal disturbance. The other thing we looked at was what impact is there on cattle exporting states versus cattle importing states. Iowa, for example, exports, and by exports I mean sends cattle out of the state for slaughter. A lot of our cattle go to Nebraska, Illinois, maybe even Kansas for slaughter, for fed cattle slaughter. Whereas Kansas is a net importing state. If you stop and restrict movement of cattle, Iowa backs up cattle, and you can't ship cattle out of Iowa because of restriction movements. You end up with real problems real quick because you don't have enough internal slaughter capacity. And the question is, how do you back those cattle up, keep them in the feedlots, that type of impact? Kansas has the opposite problem. They only have enough cattle in the state for about 50 to 60% of their slaughter. So if they get a restricted movement inside the state, they have plenty of slaughter capacity inside the state to handle their cattle, but their packing plants are going to run at way below capacity, and if you run very long that way, their packing plants would go broke. And so you have the dilemma of much different impacts on movement restrictions between a cattle exporting state and a cattle importing state. And again, the study looked at those type of impacts and how various foreign animal disease movement patterns might affect cattle flows. And the whole idea is to help inform animal health officials and regulatory officials better understanding the impacts of management practices that go into place in the event of foreign animal disease events.